There it is.
All right.
Well, we are testing out a new streaming service today, so bear with us. Everything's going to be a
Testing.
little bit new,
That's right.
but got to try some things out. Sometimes they pull the rug from under you, and you got to try something different. But
Yeah. It's a whole new affair over here. So we are testing, and we'll see, make sure everything works. I think we're supposed to be streaming also to Facebook. Is that correct?
we are. I saw we are. We're going to be live here in a second. There we are. I see we're on Facebook now. So
All right.
pulled that up. So that's good. That's progress. We'll figure this out. But another 3-4 weeks, we'll have it figured out.
Yes.
Not what we're doing.
All
But
good.
it's good to see you this morning.
Yes, sir. You too. Everything good?
Everything's good. Let's see. I got a birthday coming up next week, so I'm trying to come to terms with that. And
I just had one just a couple days ago.
yeah, you just had yours, so I'm having mine, and
Yeah.
a couple air.
I'm taking the Jack Benny strategy of aging. I'm 39 again.
You're 39.
Yes.
I'm going on 12. It works out.
That's right. There you go.
Times 4, whatever it is. Can't stop the birthdays, but I can't do much about that. But we can do a little bit about learning some cool technique from you and getting our drumming chops going and feeling good about ourselves, and that we can control.
Yes, sir.
I can't control the
That's true.
age.
This is true. Well, we will try to do our best. Of course, your questions are welcomed
Always.
and encouraged so that we can have a great dialogue. I sit here with not a lot of scripted material because I'm just free forming as I have been teaching now for 44 years. So there's a lot of stuff that I've come to in terms of assembling concept and content and putting things together, based on just lots of years of experience. And also, I had great input and great guys to sort of look up to formulate some extensions to the concepts that they laid on me, and that would be two most primary guys, Jimmy Chapin and Freddie Gruber. And then some other people are in that mix too. Had a great percussionist, a percussion teacher at Cal State Northridge, Karen Irvin. A Latin percussion guy, Jerry Steinholtz, who was great. He was kind of ever present in the Southern California area as an educator. A lot of guys that I know that I went to school with who are out moving and shaking and still playing were students of Jerry. And he was a fine guy to hook up with. One of those guys who really looked after you to make sure you had the instruments so that you could, really feel what was going on. He knew that I was not going to be a percussionist per se. Still wanted you to have your hands on the drums, even though he was talking more. How can we build that understanding and lay it into drum set land?
Yeah.
So
That's always the thing is how a lot of drummers are like percussion. It's funny. Like it's. I think it's great to do all of it as much as you can. Obviously, it's impossible to do everything. Some people do everything very well, but I think it really benefits you to dip into some hand percussion and do some
yeah,
things and
absolutely,
branch out.
and understand that value of that. I make a lot of analogies regarding the stick being an extension of the hand, and in terms of playing a hand drum, I've talked to people who have had experience playing hand drums, and I say you'd never hit your hand so hard into the hand drum that it would break. So why would you take the stick and come down with excessive downward thrust as well? You're not really doing yourself any favors. You're basically potentially injuring yourself, but you're not going to get a better sound out of the drum. The drum is really, as it works in the acoustic nature, when you draw the stick off the surface, like you do with a timpani and a concert bass drum
Right.
and all that stuff, same rules apply. You can get a nice, open, resonant tone, and if you do overplay it, you can hear the shocking of the shell.
Well,
When you hit it with blunt
as
force.
someone who plays cajon a lot, along with congos and things like that, and
Right?
hybrid percussion,
Yeah,
you're right.
that's right.
The one thing you'll learn by dipping into those is how all that stuff, all that attack, that approach really lays matters when it comes to tonality and the sound, and you tend to want to overplay that stuff, and hand percussion just sounds terrible. I think when you overplay it, you just ruin the tone. And you're right. I've taken that to the drums. Timpani is a great one where they talk about pulling the note, and that's the same thing with toms. You really it's really nice to pull that note out as opposed to pushing it through. And I'm sure a lot of guys have exposure with that, but it's interesting that you brought that up, brought back some memories.
Oh yeah, well, there was a period of time where I was playing. The thing about hand drum is, you have to build up a certain sensibility of that shop, and at some point I just realized, I would pick my hand up after playing conga drums, and you'd feel like it was like the size of a oven mitt,
Yeah.
like hey,
Yeah.
what happened, and the sensitivity was kind of blowing out. But man, there's some
True.
marvelous hand drummers out there. I got a chance to work with a few great ones. One guy notably, Richie Garcia. What a great percussionist. Richie and I know each other from probably around 1988, 87. And he worked on a couple of David Becker Tribune records.
Hmm.
Then there's a great percussionist as well, this guy Brad Dutz, who was he was a studio guy and did stuff around here. And more recently, I say, and recently, what does that mean? Maybe in the last 5 years, he moved up to, I think, the Pacific Northwest, if I'm not mistaken. But very creative guy. He would do these super creative records. And so working with him was also a pleasure. Very early on, talking about percussionists who were students of Jerry Steinholtz, Brian Kilgore. Brian is probably the first call guy here to do every movie date or TV show or whatever.
Okay.
He's the man. He's definitely well versed in all the classical percussion, but he's also a rip roaring Latin percussionist as well. David and I remember talking to Brian about this. He goes, "Oh, you gave me my first real session." So back in '87, we were recording our second record over here in Calabasas at Castle Oak Studio, and I hired Brian, and I'll never forget Ken Calais, great producer, notably associated with Fleetwood Mac, and we were getting ready to like kind of scoring out the days of what we were going to do in terms of recording. And I said, "Oh, on Thursday I'm having a percussionist come in to play." And Ken looked at me and he said, "Why?" And I go, "Well, because I'm not really a great hand drummer and I want to get a bunch
I
of
know where
stuff
this is
done
going.
quickly." And he said, "Well, it never stopped Mick Fleetwood because, Mick's so musical, man. He could probably hammer on a coffee cup and make it sound real music."
Yeah. Right.
So we hired Brian, and Brian came in and, did exactly what we wanted him to do, and it was an awesome session.
Yeah. I think people just assume that the drummers can really do percussion and vice versa. And I think you find out quickly that's not
What?
always true.
You can, but you may not get
It's,
like the real tonal quality of what that drum can do if you know
yeah.
the technical aspects to the
There's
drum.
just sensibilities that are really
Hmm.
hard. It depends on what you're looking for. I've done both on recordings, and but it depends also on the genre. Like, I probably would do better in percussion with Latin than I probably would on the kit, for example. Like everybody has
Yeah.
their deal. So yeah, Mick cracks me up. Mick's one of those guys that I like to watch because his mouth is always open when he's playing. He truly loves what he does, man, and that was always my thing with him.
Yep.
And I think I don't want to say he's underrated, but I think in some ways he's been
Oh,
undervalued.
I would concur. When there was a drummer by the name of Ian Wallace, if anybody knows that name, and Ian had come up like from England and through the circuit, as I
Big Grave.
recall, he
Sorry.
had played with King Crimson. I think he also played with Alvin Lee. Alvin Lee was from the 10 Years After band. A
Right.
lot of different things. Good morning, Mark. And so when he passed away, sadly, and I believe that was in 2007, there was a memorial. And the story is that Ian had married what was Mick Fleetwood's ex-wife.
Oh, okay.
If I'm not mistaken, it was Jenny Fleetwood. Anyway, Mick was talking about Ian's continued enthusiasm to grow and nurture his drumming skills. And I met Ian through Freddie Gruber, probably around 1987 or so. And Ian was just a great, funny, whimsical dude and a great player. And so, he was very friendly to me. He invited me to watch a rehearsal of Don Henley when he was playing with Don Henley. Uh, Sadly, Don never made it to the rehearsal.
Oh, that would have
So I
been
was able to look through Ian's gear,
yeah.
but we were just sitting around at what I don't remember even what the
I
studio
hope he
was.
shows. Hope he shows.
But so anyway, Mick was talking about how Ian, when he remarried or had married what was formerly Mick's ex-wife, how he was such a great father to the kids and all this stuff, and how he had this great continued enthusiasm and love for, pushing his drumming forward as a continued student to Freddie Gruber. And he said, and Ian would bother me all the time and say, like, man, you should really go to Freddie Gruber and check him out. It was pretty funny. But Mick seems so much like an internal guy and is just able to internalize stuff. If anybody has not listened to the very roots of Fleetwood Mac, right, meaning when it was Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, where they were pretty much doing a lot of blues, check it out, because Mick is a badass MFer. He's just killing it, man. His shuffles and his whole concept is just stupid good.
Yeah, and I just feel like he's just got a great feel, like what he did with those songs. So much of it's subtle, but it's like, oh my God, it's really
how they
break it down really good.
I mean, how they evolved gradually after Peter Green left.
Right, after they reformed.
And then Bob Welsh was in there for a bit before Lindsey and Stevie Nicks.
Well, all I know is when all that drama was going on after Rumors, Mick's just like, I just want to bring my drums and play, man. I don't want any of this stuff. I just here to play, man. He just wanted to get his stuff set up and play.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of drummers are actually built that way. I don't know. Most drummers I know are just like, I don't want any of the drum. I just want to play my tune. I want to play my
That's
shows.
what I want to do. We were talking about that before we signed on, about getting back in drumming. I was actually playing Jeffrey, for those who are listening to this conversation. I found a video from a gig that I was doing. I don't know when it was. It could have been 2011, 2012. And back in the day, I was doing a lot of cover gigs. And at that time, I could sing. Now with all the talking and stuff like that and not being out there, I can, on certain days, I still have my range. I just don't have the power and like the good clarity of vocal prowess that I did when I was younger. Yeah. But it reminded me of what a valuable asset to be a singing drummer. Now, I didn't sing lead all the time because I just felt like if you're the drummer and you're in the back there and people are like looking up and they hear like somebody singing, they're looking around. Who's singing? Oh, it's the drummer. It's not the great place to be. You want that guy up front. But I would sing some specific tunes that I knew I could bring, some good quality to. And back when I was doing this, I had a group of guys. We just called ourselves Bruce Becker and Friends. And we would play once a month. It was just a rip-roar of fun. The guys were exceptionally talented guys. Trent Stroh on bass, John Thomas on keyboards and guitar, and Paul Nelson on guitar and vocals, and everybody sang. It was kind of like really easy to do. And what I would do before the gigs is I would say, what do you want to do? And we would maybe add 3 or 4 songs. Nobody rehearsed. Everybody went home and did their homework and showed up on the bandstand. Yep. We might sit for just a minute before we played and said, all right, on that tune, what harmony are you going to sing and what are you going to do? And like that one song I played you we had never played it before. It was a Bob Seger tune. And I just wanted to do it. It was the end of the night and we had learned it and we hadn't played it. And I went, let's do it. And there's like,
that's the time to do it.
Well, it was like a holdover because you look at it, there's like, I think just a few drunk ladies dancing and running around.
That's what I mean. That's the time to do it.
For the visual, it's probably pretty funny. Yeah,
we already got paid. We're done. This is Jerry. We're getting out of here in a minute and breaking down gear. We might as well just pull this one out. And you know what? Oftentimes it turns out to be a rip-roaring fun. Like what I heard was really, really good. And I had no idea that was you and you were singing it. They sound amazing. And I'm like, yeah, those often turn out to be the best moments. But I'm glad it was recorded. That's actually great.
Well, I have a few of those, and I always say, or my wife says this too, well, you have corroborative evidence that you could sing, and you did play, and then with the old photos with my kids, like that showed up on Facebook, I have this one photo, it was like a photo shoot, just like a promo photo. It was a friend of mine who was a photographer in New York, and he said, let's do some shots. I'm like, cool. And he's got me a shot, and I just had like really long hair. So I say, I had evidence that I had hair, Up until
you and I,
39 or 40, and then the wheel started to fall off.
Well, for good or bad, you and I did not have the luxury of people having phones in our earlier gigging life. And sometimes I wish they had, because I think there's some moments and some things I did that would have been really cool to have captured that way. But then there were some shenanigans and stuff. Like, it's probably just best that was left on the floor and not, maybe.
Yeah, you know, there's a demo that I did in 1977 with my brother David and my friend Jim. I was just 18. David would have been like 15, going on 16. My friend Jim just probably short of turning 18.
Okay.
And those guys had, the summer before, surprised me when I came back from visiting my cousin up in the Bay Area with getting a bass and a guitar. David got a guitar, Jim got a bass, and they said, we're going to be a power trio. And I'm like, okay. And so we started working on our rock and roll tunes. And, you know, for the age and for what we were doing, like the rhythm section's really good. Although I sound like a jazzy rock drummer for some reason because, and I think back, because I was listening to a lot of Danny Seraphin. I love Chicago. Louis Bellson and Buddy Rich were always on my playlist as well. So like when I hear some of the things that I did in terms of sensibility, it's a rocky thing, but there's also kind of like a little bit of a little tilted kind of jazzy tonality to everything that we did. But man, it's pretty clean. So my student separated all the tracks and sent them to my brother, and David's going to put it into whatever he uses, I think Logic, and just try to sweeten it up. And
Nice.
I don't know if I would ever put that in the public because, let's put it this way,
Kids
the
can have it.
vocals were the last thing we thought of. We did not go in prepared vocally. So
Right.
the vocals are kind of like, they're, you know, B minus, C plus at best.
You use some AI, we'll get that fixed up. You know what I mean? We'll hook you up.
Perhaps, not a
Perhaps.
bad. And then people go like, man, you sound great.
Yeah, well, don't ask me to play live. I'm strictly going to be a studio band now.
Well, that's what's happening, I think, in our world anyway, right?
Well, we could have a 4-hour discussion. Yeah. Oh, it's getting worse and worse. Yeah, I know that Beto talks about it often, and it's not good. But you know what? We're going to stay on more positive things. I tell you what, I'll let you get into some thoughts today.
Yeah.
I'm going to check out chat.
Okay.
As always, guys, and I just wanted to say, you know, we got some people in here, which is great. Get some knowledge, but also,
Hey, Neil.
you know, this is the day, this is the time where Bruce really welcomes these questions. I'm going to be here in chat, so please drop those questions down when you can, and I will get those over to you when we have that first break. If you can, drop a cue in front of the question. That always helps out. But other than that, Bruce, do your thing.
Okay.
I'll talk to you in a bit.
All right. So I just wanted to talk about a little bit more about developing the inside of the hand. Of course, certain calisthenics will help promote that. But in terms of things that I would, you know, utilize to calisthenically to build those up, I would talk about my roughs and my drags to really put forward a fine-tuned squeezing of the stick inside the hand. So, for example, if I play a 3-stroke rough, which would be 2 grace notes in front of a dominant note. Let's play it on the more articulate pad. I have right, left, right, 2 grace notes tucked in front of the dominant note, and I want to make sure those grace notes are as close as I can get them to the dominant note. So an old school kind of teaching, and as I recall from, you know, Freddie, Jimmy Chapin, and some other guys that I'd seen coming up and watching what they were doing, they would say 3-stroke rough, up, tap, down, or that would be more my nomenclature to describe what's going on. The problem with that is when you start to perform at the rate of speed or the rate of positioning in terms of when it's becoming grace notes, this is kind of an excessive, unnecessary action, and you might not be getting those 2 grace notes to sit comfortably in front of the dominant note, and so you'd be better off to just let your forearms drop. And when I say drop, I'm not pushing the sticks down, I'm dropping with the weight of the sticks. Of course, I'm helping to direct to, as I would describe, the push, tap, pull. Push, tap, pull. And then, of course, left hand. In the early stages of development, to really get that to be more of the prospect of letting go, I would take my middle note and have it sit a little bit higher as I cascade to the pad. Just making sure and ensuring that you have a good solid bite to the second of the 2 strokes, which would be the right, left, right. Or the left, right, left. There are things that you could do with that same, close to the kind of concept of that, which would be maybe a herta, but that would be whereby you are striking the first of those three strokes as the accent. In this case, we're not. We're letting that third stroke really resonate with the accent. And so, you could play like lots of little effects of playing 16th notes with two grace notes in front, and play a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1, 2, 3. And honestly, it doesn't really matter the tempo when I'm playing those 16th notes. The rate of positioning of the two grace notes should be the same, whether I'm playing it here or, and then you can get super challenging and play, of course, like a paradiddle. Which is pretty challenging. You can do double paradiddles and triple paradiddles, and I go definitely progressively through that. But the setup, is really built on some constructs of making sure that how the stick is seated in the hand so that the efficiency factor of the open-close is used in a more productive fashion, and that you don't abuse yourself, that you're not pounding and squeezing. So, how that hand works is super important to get inside of the natural structure and constructs of the open and close value that we could have, and not adding some funny things with the thumb. You might get some tendonitis in there if you're using your thumb in a funny way. And I've had many students through the years who have had those issues, who, according to their own testimonies, they'll tell me, man, you saved me. I didn't have to have surgery. I feel great. I don't have any forearm issues anymore, or in the wrist, or whatever the case may be. I don't profess to be a doctor, but I do know sensible skill set will be a good buffer to push away any potential issues that you might encounter in your performances. So with that, going back into the inside of the hand, that push-pull technique, that's a very natural thing to really operate from. What you want to maintain, though, is that you have the stick in a good position for the traction. Okay, notice my ring and pinky finger are opening up a little more, and my middle finger is more of the pivot point. Well, that's what it is. It is the pivot point. It is the more dominant finger, and as it sits in position, of course, it would be more, practical or more sensible or just natural to pivot over that. But I don't want to eliminate contact and usage of my ring and pinky finger. I've seen people talk about that. Oh, just get the stick here, and these guys just sit here comfortably. And even in that presentation of saying, yeah, just hold the stick like this, not really good guidance. Yes, I want to hold the stick like that, but my hand wants to go in, or, whatever the case may be. I see guys holding the stick out here with curled fingers, rendering the fingers in this position to a fairly useless and not very productive way of holding the stick. That being said, I would never negate posture and gesture, which does not necessarily have anything to do with good, clean technique. Technique is a means of good, fluid expression. But there are guys who make the case that their technique is kind of a little funny, and they have workarounds, and it works rather well for them. So I don't know if they're feeling any discomfort or pain or little issues. That's for them to worry about. If they come to me, I'm definitely all about working that through. So that being said, that push-pull technique is a big element. And of course, there's guys who have what I call, high-octane chops. I don't know what they have in their blood, or if they have like chips in their, AI chips in their tendons that can move the stick fast. I'm more the real guy, like just the practical guy, pragmatic. If you can get to supersonic chops, great. But that should not deter you from still developing great musicianship. You want to have just a clean, fluid execution of what you're doing. And so if you don't meet up, like single stroke sitting at with one or two measures of 16th notes at 112 or 118 beats per minute, so what? If they're at 95 or 100 or 92, if they're clean and you can execute them and have control, you're in the right spot. So that being said, going back to the roughs, drags, and diddles theme, you know, that 3-stroke rough is one thing. Let's go to sort of the brother of that and say the drag. So in my world, the rough is always an alternating stroke and the drag is a double stroke. So I've seen out there like some confusion or some other ways of making that, calling a 3-stroke rough a left, left, right. I would not call that that. I would say a drag. And so the drag even puts a little bit more of an emphasis of that squeeze and the sharpness of it because now there's no middle note between those two notes. It's that grace note just being a double. And the codependency value of that drag in front of that dominant note is rather important. You know, if you just do a short, fast squeeze and you have nothing to post it up against, it doesn't have quite the meaning. And if I was looking to really refine and develop the nuance of that for super nice, clear, and clean articulated strokes, I really want to sit and work that out. It's not a necessity, but I'd like to have that clean stroke so that if somebody said, yeah, you know, maybe dirty it up a little bit more, make it buzz, I got the ability. If you only have the buzz and it's a little more of a buzz, and somebody wants you to play it real clean and articulate, you may not be able to do that. And so I always say, you know, go for both. You can sit on a very clean side of things with your articulation, but you also want to get the nuance and learn how to play from a dirty, greasier, grittier point of view as well. And so take those posture and gestures that you hear from your great influences and bring that into your performance as well. So, you know, when you're thinking back to like Greasy Guys, Ziggy from the Meters, no greasier than that, and on and on and on. We can bring up a whole range of more modern players, go back to the roots players, and kind of assess like what's the value of those particular standout dialects or nuances that they may have and bring them into your playing. You got to be a little bit of a spy, so to speak. Do your studying and listening and bring in those little subtle nuances that you appreciate that you hear from somebody. Maybe somebody else doesn't really hear that as well as you might. But whatever it is, use your imagination to draw it into your playing. And again, I think good technical skills can help to really formulate some thoughts behind that and bring it forward. So with the drag, there's a little bit of a difference in my delivery. I wouldn't kind of straight arm it like I did with the 3-stroke rough to start. I would have a little bit more of the lift and release that you would get out of knowing about the molar technique. Okay, I use the molar technique as more of just a nomenclature because it's been around for so long and Jimmy Chapin talked about it and it's all about the locomotive motion. But anything that would have to do with this release and the lift and the drop would be falling under that sort of that definition for me. And so, when I'm here, like flams, I would have the same delivery system. And, of course, my grace notes would sit slightly lower than my dominant note, as I need to get them to the pad a little quicker. And so with the drags, I've got a couple things that I utilize as performance stuff. I've just, start with non-alternating drag strokes, so just a right-hand lead, then a left-hand lead. And if I just can make a point of really sitting into the level of slow. So if I was doing that, I would play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and get into the texture of the lift and the elasticity of the lift for breath, for good recognition of the space between that note, and connect with it. The more you make a conscious connection with that, the better off your time's going to feel. Because now you're making a definite consideration of the space between those notes. And that might seem, well, but that's so slow. Of course I would feel that. Well, not always. And so when you can start to feel that, the lift and the drop and the subdivision that might fall between, whether it's an eighth note or a triplet or 16th notes. You're going to put a larger emphasis on that, and it's definitely going to have a large impact on how you feel time. This is great. Metronomes, I'm pointing to my phone. It's not a metronome, but we all have an app on our phone, I think, now that is a metronome app that we can use. And that kind of time is great. It's a very intellectual approach to time because it's like static pulse. But we also want to bring a breath and a lift to our time. Drummers of past did not have metronomes, and there's great examples of guys who have great feels. I was actually watching a clip of one of my favorite drummers who was a big influence on me when I was a kid, with John DeChristopher from his podcast Live from My Drum Room, and he was interviewing Simon Kirke. And Simon Kirke of most notably Bad Company, but also before that, the band Free, All Right Now. That guy was a badass dude, man. He had a great feel and just a great attention to the spirit of what the tune needed. And the feel really was what it was. But there was no metronomes. Those guys were playing all in time. And listen to that stuff. It just breathes and it has a nice flavor to it. John Bonham, Ringo, all that stuff, man. It was like, who's going to play to a predestined, you either had good time or you didn't. But I know this is good, and we play a lot of things now to metronomes so that it's on the grid, and so when you could do your edits and you can cut it up and do what you need to do. Cool. But I still think it's really important to work on your inner time and your understanding and get the breath. So here's somebody. I saw one of Freddie Gruber's exercises in which you would, in German, pull the stick with your fingers, relax, pull, and so on. The goal is to build the mechanics of the support of the stick. Yes, okay. Something along the lines of this, a little squeeze into the palm, could be something that I would utilize. And it wouldn't be necessarily all about that. That would be a positioning value, so that I'm seated on my fingerprints and not here, like in the more of the middle joints or the last joint of the fingers kind of cradled. I'd want to sit more sensitively here. That's what gives me the good draw of the squeeze. That would be sort of a roots to that, and I use that in my building blocks. I have a little bit more detail to the, I don't want to say the complexity, but the value of that. And, I was just kind of tracing all the stuff that I see out in the world of drum education, and there's, a lot of people putting stuff out there. The fact of the matter is that there's no instant hacks. There is a dedication to a process of retooling and rebuilding. When you have, maybe you're playing 25 or 20 years or 17 years or maybe even 10 years, and you've amassed a certain amount of musicianship and you built up a formulation of how you play, but you didn't really give a lot of consideration to the development of your hands in a more, really scrutinized manner, you might find that things don't work as well. And in order to systematically remove the old reflexes and insert new reflexes and get a better delivery system, there is a process to which I do on a daily basis. That is what I do every day, Monday through Friday. I have students all over the planet. You can talk to any of my current students or former students, and they'll probably tell you the value of what they got from working with me in terms of the nuance to their technique and the fluidity. So the point is that, saying again, there are no instant hacks. There's not one calisthenic that's going to get you over the fence, so to speak. And if I was to just go back and, as an analogy, say like, well, I learned a paradiddle in 1972, that doesn't mean I stopped practicing a paradiddle. I want to get the good performance of that so that I have good fluid motion to be able to utilize that sticking, or things that would be in the category of paradiddle-esque stickings, combining singles and doubles. So anyway, that might be the exercise Freddie was sharing with you, or that you saw on a video. I don't know what you're exactly referring to, but nonetheless, here we go. As we go faster with less time and space, the delivery becomes more of a drop, catch, open, close than bounce or molar. Well, it depends on when you say faster. If I'm playing fast 16th triplets, and we'll use this pad because we get a good profile position to my right hand. So I'm just playing 16th triplets. I'm not really opening and closing my hand. I can get that stick to just seat nicely on my ring and pinky finger. I don't even need my middle finger. But I like the middle finger there because it's a supportive role. Is it clinging to my stick or adding any excessive pinch or pressure pulling in? No, it's sitting passively, but it's there. And the body of the stick is sort of being driven from the forearm, of course. I've got my good molar motion, but I'm not going to do any squeezing and grabbing. Now, that being said, yes, if I was playing double strokes, everything would be a mini push to pull. Or if I'm doing something like this is a paradiddle diddle diddle. So I would express this. There's a point tempo-wise or momentum-wise where you got to get in, dig in, and pull. Get a little more muscular with it because you can't just expect it to come out. But here, I can. So, there's a range of tempos or kind of sitting in a certain momentum where I can get things to work rather relaxed and feel the draw of that stick kind of helping to motivate my fingers, where the fingers are more passively traveling with the stick and not engaging in a necessary of a pull. And it might not look like that, but that's what it is. And if you're looking to develop good doubles, there's like a whole path to really operate and get your values of how do you get to downstroke double, how do you get an upstroke double, and utilizing good understanding of the mechanics of the inside of the hand, and also be able to lift up and use that momentum of a lift and not get disrupted by the mechanics on the inside of the hand and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a variable of 2 different tap strokes. I would have one where maybe I just drop to the pad and I'm waiting for my next move. Maybe it's an upstroke, maybe it's a turn, or I'm returning right away back into my hand, which would be on face value perhaps similar to the idea of squeezing that stick, the second stroke, into my hand. I don't really like that because it tends to give a performance of more of an inverted double stroke, and it sounds more like bullets rather than roly-poly nice open doubles. Okay, but back to the top of our drags and all that stuff. Let me just demonstrate a couple things. So if I just take a regular drag, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in front of eighth notes to start. So we play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In that setting, my sticking is inverted. I'm playing right, left, left, right. So I would be looking for, of course, the good squeeze, staying nice and slow and operating under that slow, breathy tempo, being able to really watch what's going on and maintain solid structure of that squeeze. I lost you, Jeff. I just see the outline of the moon or something like that. So there we go, back. I might also consider the drag when it's an upstroke. So if I put it at the end of a triplet, in other words, on the third partial, I could play it 1 and lead, 2 and lift, lift, lift. That's different than sitting down here in terms of the first exercise where the drag is just sitting in front of the dominant note. Now it's lifting because as I rise with my drag, that sets up the downstroke for the next downbeat or the next dominant note. And on and on and on. And I'd want to work those out just so I feel a good characteristic and a good relationship to the squeeze. And then I can get the calisthenics going to like really put them into a place of practice. Again, sometimes we practice things to build up the inside of the hand. Are they performative for drumistic things? Yes, but are they literal translations? Probably not. If I'm looking at literature, snare drum literature, yeah, I can get like a whole bunch of different things that would be cast into the motions and the movements to something like the Contemporary Percussionist by Charles Memphis or any of the Wilcoxon books or the Nard book. Anything that's like kind of rudimental snare drum literature. you can start to take your themes of how things move and then insert those, especially when there's no stickings involved. In Wilcoxon, you're sort of boxed in because the stickings are there. But in Nard, not. Many of those contributions have almost no directives or a couple of directives. There's not like massive stickings written in, which I like because then you can kind of add your level of performance for fluidity and for good execution. So, but here's the thing that I've done I think I've done this on video before, but taking that drag exercise and putting it into 16th notes. I'm going to play this and check this out. This would be, the sticking would be right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right. So I would call that the second inversion of a paradiddle. So labeling my paradiddles, I have my regular paradiddle, I have my inverted paradiddle, I have my reverse paradiddle, and then I call that, what I just did, the second inversion, where the diddle is split between the two subgroupings. As I lift up to play down, I have just enough space to put that drag in there. And it's also basically the sticking of a Rhythmic. Okay, it's not the rhythm of a Rhythmic, but it's the same sticking. When you play a Rhythmic, single Rhythmic would be played right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right. And if you're getting the theme of the orchestration, it would be down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And you go fast, it turns into a double paradiddle. That was Jimmy Chapin's concept of these, flattening out the rudiments or compressing the rudiments and stuff like that. And so he would tell me, a single Rhythmic, it's nothing but a backwards double paradiddle. And I would say, oh, you're right, just the way the sticking's laid out. And of course, when you play it super fast, you can't really get that drag to be as noted as the grace notes when you're ripping it through real fast. But nonetheless, it's a good understanding of what you could do with that. So playing those drags in 16th notes, that's kind of what you're doing. And then I would say, for something like that, that's a great calisthenic to work through. If I was doing one of my warm-ups, if I'm sitting around on the pad getting ready to teach, I would do a drag exercise that would be which has that theme of right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Anyway, those calisthenics, they come as a byproduct of going through a little bit more of the mechanical breakdown of things. And once you kind of understand the inner workings, now you have a good starting point to really let those rudiments carry you forward. Again, you can twist around and get the wranglings and the rhymes and riddles of rudimental stuff and kind of work it. But if you have a faulty delivery, you might get kind of hung up later on. So delivery and motion and understanding, how do you tap into getting rid of tension? It's a concept. It's a understanding of how things move and being more directed to this and the extension of that, the stick, right? So I don't want to just hammer down and just play stickings. I want to understand motions and movements, get a choreography so things dance. So with the drags, that would be another, again, my titling of roughs, drags, and diddles. If I was doing kind of carrying forward, this is something that I did as a kid quite a bit, but a 4-stroke rough paradiddle. Whoops, let's try that again. Yeah, they're not working today right now. I got to get that. There we go. So you're squeezing in 3 grace notes to a dominant note. It's kind of like interlaced doubles, right? and then putting them in front of a paradiddle, which is psychotic. But it's in the Buddy Rich book, so I did it. Going through that with Freddie. We went through all those. And at the time, man, I was in it. Like, I had all that, what do you call it, youth and angst and attitude and fire to practice that stuff to get it going. So if I just sit for like 10 minutes quietly, I can bring that back into the fold. And we're just kind of starting the day. I didn't really have any warm-up, and it's a Sunday morning, and we're running around and trying to get some breakfast a little bit. And I got my 2 younger kids, you know, running around, wanting to go out with Mom. They're out at the park riding bikes today. So it was a little bit of a scrambled egg morning. That being said, those are kind of cool. I would use the 4-stroke rough if I was playing a shuffle. I would be going. You know, that would be a cool way of playing a 4-stroke rough. Going on to a 5-stroke rough, there's a thing that I use in stick control to help formulate some construction to that. So if I was playing number 25 on page 31 in stick control, it's in 3/8 time. It's 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 1. So that's a little more to the slow point of things. And, you know, when things are moving slower, you can have a slightly different mechanical delivery to that. So if I broke down the right hand, I went da 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 1 2 3 and 1 2 3 and 1 2 3 and 1 2 3 and 1. I would have what I call on the 3 and to 1 a drop pull down. Drop pull strike, 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 drop pull strike. Well, that starts to get into a little bit of that extended push to pull, right? You're kind of coming down. When you're coming up, it's really kind of a pull and a strike. I'm not necessarily pushing so much. I'm kind of pulling in. I come down to a more solid strike note, and then as I come up, I grab those notes. And I did a video regarding playing 3 up and 3 down. That was more of just a textured technical approach. For a little bit more subtle nuance, I could play it. I could use it as some kind of a musical subtlety inside what I'm doing. I don't know if I would think like that, you know, it's always like that. What is your philosophy on stick weight, diameter, and length? Oh, that's very personal, Mike, but I would say this. You want a stick that, you know, has a well-balanced element to it. So, right, some sticks are top-heavy, some sticks are not. I've been with Vic Firth for a long time, so I think I'm with Vic Firth for about 35 years now. And so, you know, my choices... That's interesting. In the last month or so, I really have been embracing more 5Bs. Prior to that would have been a long time 5A guy. Like here's a pair of 5A right here. And I'm a big fan of the double glaze. The double glaze 5A, because the lacquer finish really is very sticky and nice. And what do I want to say? Feels just bonded to my fingers. There's no slick, slippery kind of feel. Very tacky feel, without having to put on any stupid stuff like stick wax or anything like that. But, you know, you want a well-balanced stick. It's hard for me to play with pencils. You know, like I used to play with an SD4 or even an 85A, which is a combination of a 5A and an 8D. They seem rather thin. I like a little weight. I know Vinny's got, you know, he's got his 5B stick, and I get it. You know, you should be able to play light with whatever stick you're playing. But I don't have any like magic of saying, oh, you need to play with this stick. I would say as a starting point, a good 5A is a good place to start. And with the balance of a Vic Firth, definitely recommend those. I don't know much about the other brands, so I can't really speak with any experience. Can only tell you from what I know. And it's important to understand the balance so that when you do reposition maybe your fulcrum, where you're a little bit behind the balance point, that you know how the stick's going to operate. And even though it feels like lead pipes, and you get a different tonality to it. You know, for rock and roll and for attitude and posture and gesture, I would never discount that as an option. So, you know, you want to get inside the pretty imperfect elements of certain things and understand how that benefits your performance. If you're playing molar and you're way back here and you're fighting with the stick to play one-handed 16th notes, then get hip, get on top of the stick so you're in a balanced position so that the weight value is working on your behalf. But again, like diameter and length, you know, if you're smaller in stature, maybe a Steve Gadd stick because they're a little shorter. Maybe not. Maybe you like a regular standard 5A. But you got to go out and just mix it up a little bit. If I was working with somebody, I can see kind of where they're at with the stick. I can see. I'm very astute with the observations on noting what's going on. I made multiple recommendations to thousands of students to say, hey man, try this or check this out. That's my job. That's what I do. So, and if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be, you know, stepping up to the plate. So I'd have to see what you're doing with the performance of the stick, and maybe what you have is fine, maybe it's not, you know. Sometimes I say, get away to your stick, you know. But my preference right now is a 5B. Actually, I put on order some 55As because I used to play those before I got hip to the double glaze, and they didn't make them, but they're making them for me. I've been, like I said, with the company for a long time, and a big supporter. Thank you for the morning lesson. Thank you for attending, man. Thank you. It's good to see some people out there. Oh, is this Facebook, Jeffrey? Nice. Hey, thank you, Joe. I know Joe. Joe used to have a great podcast, man. But sadly, I don't think Joe's doing it, but it was like a gem of a podcast for all ranges of different drummers, from educators to performers, and I think pretty much every great drummer on the planet was on that, right, Joe? If I'm not mistaken. You'd have to tell me. Hello, another exercise for more control. Another exercise. What would be another exercise? Well, let me finish my theme for stick control with the 5-stroke rough, because that's really a good one to get the inside of the hand working. So I'm playing 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and, whoops, 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3, 1 and 2 and 3, 1. And again, when I play at that tempo, I would keep the stick more in my hand. What I'm looking to do is get a little bit more of the push-pull effect that we were talking about with the 3-stroke rough or the drag. And so my aim would be to get this. Now notice when I'm getting those, what they would be if you're looking in stick control on page 31. And sorry, Jeff, see, I erred. We could have had that up there, but whatever. Everybody has a copy of stick control, I hope. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and a 1. So as I'm playing those 30-second notes on beat 3, I'm going to slide into my dominant note, my downbeat. And those are, again, accommodating the nice openness. I'll say one more thing just about that while I was looking at my hands. It just sparked a thought. This, rather important. I've heard people talk about to gap or not to gap. Well, it's a non-issue for me. One, you squelch the stick. You can do, like I said, all sorts of posture and gesture, but if you're looking for good performance of the hands and how things can move effectively in position to where you want to be with your fingers, then I don't even want to have a major discussion about it. Again, I'll say for a workaround or something, but it's not really doing any favors to pinch down here because you're applying pressure here, which basically closes down access to the back of the hand. So I want a nice, easy, free setup of the hand. And, you know, if we look at the old guys, you know, look at the Roy Burns, Lou Malin, what was it called again? Development of Finger Control. I can't think of the full title, but, you know, there's some pictures of the hands, man, and they're just like lovely. Everything is nicely positioned. Of course, no match grip playing back then, all traditional grip, which of course is just as important for many people. For me, I teach it. I'm not really a trad grip player per se, but I know my mechanics because I did spend some time really honing those in back, how many years ago? Oh man, not quite 50 years ago, but 47. But I teach a lot of that to some of my students. I have, I would say, I don't know, 20% of the guys want to get involved in the traditional grip, 25%. It's a place where they started and then they moved into the match grip because they wanted to get that big backbeat. And then there's a interest to rekindle up a relationship with that position and see how it works into formatting what they do when they're playing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on, if you're looking to play big backbeat, you can do it. It can be done nicely in traditional grip. You get a nice release and wrap around. You'd probably want to sit in a more cradled position so you don't take in the vibration of the stick when you hit the hoop. If you're looking for rim shots, got to be super mindful of how that works. But so the takeaway, going back to stick control, page 31, my favorite is number 29 because it has a paradiddle. Which gives me a nice chance to give me a counterbalance to developing my left hand. I could stay with number 26 and just work that one out. But once you get that, you want to kind of dance between the two. So you're giving a good 50% of your view to your left hand. And while I'm not ever saying, gotta get in there and play left hand lead, you want to lift up your left hand. But when you perform with your strengths. Practice your weaknesses, perform with your strengths. So, if you were playing a gig, you don't suddenly go like, I'm doing everything right-handed. I better do some left-hand stuff, and otherwise I'm not fulfilling my mission. No, you're playing a gig. You're trying to be musical and trying to set up a vibe and create an ambiance and express and stuff like that. You're not thinking about technique. But in this game, where we're sitting on the pad and we're finding all our little insights and tools of the trade, you got to give it some good, clear thought. And so, other things that I would do are some double stroke exercises and building up how the doubles work. I've probably laid this one out before because I'll sneak like little calisthenic flows that I would do, but there's a setup to it. But one thing I would do is, it's kind of like a stick control inspired exercise. I'm going to play a 13 stroke roll to a double paradiddle. And inside that, there's a whole bunch of choreographed stuff going on there. I would speak it out slowly. Down, tap, 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 up, tap, down, tap, tap, up, double, down, tap, 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 up, tap, down, tap, tap, up, double, down. And actually, I'd sit at that slower tempo to really work out all the lifts and drops and make sure that they are recognized and tracked. Your inner vision of tracking every nuance of what you're doing movement-wise is super important, again, to bring better value to your performance when you start to kick it up in speed. So you can conduct a better value of the space of the doubles and the clarity of that. And then, of course, there's a couple things that I'm throwing in there, those upstrokes, which at this point in time, they're just a maneuver to get to the downstroke. We can set up a whole precedent of accenting those, but not now. And also getting a good, clear downstroke without overplaying the stroke on the down. You don't want to just get sucker punched into gravity because you're coming down. You want to be able to develop a touch on the downstroke and get the dance so that things are moving nicely and, your ability to take and formulate some deeper thoughts of what you want to do. And that's where the fun really is, where you get super deep inside what you're doing to try to, make things sparkle for the music. Things that maybe people aren't even aware of or, they go kind of unnoticed. That's the magic. There's a lot of drummers that I'll hear do certain things when I was doing, my listening and growing and exploring. And even when I look back and I listen to stuff that I wasn't so attentive to, and I'll go like, damn, that's freaking so cool and so nuanced, So anyway, Jeffrey, any other questions in the mix out there in our live stream that's going through Facebook and YouTube simultaneously with our new technological streaming service that we're trying? How's that going?
It's going well. We had at least I had a little, like 2 to 3 second little buffer problem on your end, but I don't know. Like sometimes it's the service or who knows what's going on. It could be me too. So I don't know. I don't think it was a big deal.
No. Don't
No,
stress about
things
that.
are going great. We've had a great group in here. I don't have any like actual questions, but I just wanted to pop up some people who did step in, like Frederick. Had a question about your European.
Hi, Frederick. Well, let's see. I don't have a drum camp this year, but I will probably be in London at the end of September and early October, if that's of any interest to you. I know you're in Sweden, so you're not really that far. But no, perhaps next year in 2026, I plan to slowly start to get out there again because as I, kind of withdrew and formulated more of my what do I want to say, the teaching practice as I do now, starting back, well, I'm going to say, 2013 was kind of a marking point because my daughter was born in 2013. So that kind of put me on a path to be more here and be a dad and not really travel like I used to previous to that. I used to go to Italy and I used to go to Austria and Germany, and I would be in Holland or Belgium and sometimes up in Latvia and Argentina and doing a bunch of different kind of teaching masterclass events. But it seems like now this is the time to kind of get back out and do the mingling project and rekindle. So I'll be up at Bentley's Drum Shop on April 22nd in Fresno, a first-class drum shop out there in the sea of conglomerate nonsense. Dana holds his own in Fresno and has a great shop, and I'll be up there doing a clinic on the 22nd. That's April 22nd. And the Wednesday, I'll be teaching. And I don't know how he's got it structured, but I'll spend the day Wednesday teaching. And then on the way back, I don't have the location, but I am set to do a masterclass in Bakersfield, and I don't remember the store, and it's through Cesario, who runs this, heads up the Facebook group, Active Drummers in Bakersfield. And I will have to do a promo because we just kind of set that up a little bit last minute, and I'll be talking about that, but that's going to be on April 24th. And then there's some other things that I'm working on, too, to get out there on planet Earth, so to speak, and not sit remotely here. Jeff and I actually have, and I don't think we launched it yet. We're talking about it, but we have a masterclass set up for
May 18th. So
May 18th. Yes,
we'll make some movement this week.
We're going to drop that, and that will be a virtual one. I think that those are great. This is what I do for 11 years. I've been doing this online. So my strengths of bringing my observation skills and all my skill set to watch and observe what people are doing and push forward have been fully actualized here. Of course, live is fun because a lot of people, that engagement, we don't want to be virtually on screens all the time. We need to mix it up and bump into each other and say, hey, what the heck's going on? So that's a little bit more of my mission for 2025 into 2026. So I'm hoping that I'll be, getting out there a little bit more, like I said, throughout the States, perhaps into Canada, and certainly want to get back over to Europe because I used to travel there about 3 times a year for many, many years. That would be
the Bentley's information is over on the website, brucebecker.com. Check the socials. We'll pin some stuff up on the page. And then if you drop over at brucebecker.com and you want maybe some updates, we won't inundate you, believe me. Just drop an email or whatever. We'll get on the newsletter list.
Watch my usual suspects of social media. I'll put some more just reminders for people because, hey, I love sharing the information. I have, like I said, 44 years of teaching experience, and oh man, I don't know when would I call myself a professional gigging drummer? Probably since around 1975, starting with parties, playing at the church. So that's a couple of minutes of drumming and stuff like that. And I've done thousands of gigs, and a few hundred sessions or so, making records with my brother, but doing a lot of varieties of sessions. So I take all that experience and try to bring a very unique understanding to how you can take that technical element of what I bring forward and bring it to your style of playing, the groove element or the improv element, or whatever you're looking for. If it's if it's phrasing building blocks to get a better understanding of how to solo, if it's jazz concepts, if it's some Latin concepts, if it's just straight up rock and roll, man, I've got a large plethora of things to speak about. So there's
Do
no
you? Oh,
shortage.
sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
Go ahead.
Do you want a couple questions before we tap out of here?
Sure,
Soon?
man.
Okay,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
got some. Might as well get them in here. Pretty good questions here. Let me give you some space.
Could you tell us if your thoughts and tips are strengthen match grip left hand lead? Yeah, for strengthening match grip, yeah, I think it's always good. So when I was a kid doing Freddie Gruber stuff, and that was like a long time. I did 7.5 years or so of studies with Freddie. And then I hung with him for an additional 15 or 16 years, watching him teach. But everything we did was right hand and left hand lead, a lot of left handed leaded exercises to build up a better character. That being said, when you're thinking about your performance, your right hand has a certain role, R-O-L-E, not R-O-L-L, to kind of dominate with for keeping time. And this is either a backbeat or a color hand. And the two sensibilities have different conceptual approaches for building technique. So, but I still think it's a value to sit and play some left-hand lead. In fact, I've resurrected some really cool rock and roll patterns that I would do that are right-hand and left-hand lead stuff. And, you know, kind of leaning into some aspects of what I did with Freddie, but some aspects of what I grabbed through working through the New Breed book with Gary Chester's concepts. And putting those, again, into some building blocks. Okay, am I going to switch over and just be a left-hand leading guy? I don't think so. But I do want to have an understanding of how that works to strengthen up the left hand. But at the end of the day, you know, sitting around and working only your right hand for molar is not necessarily what you want to do. You want to work that weak hand so that your molar is accessible. So if I was to do my one again, what I call my stick control exercise for singles, I have 3 approaches. I'll just do the more German approach, molar. So what I'm doing, you know, I'm playing molar singles. There's no fingers involved in there. And I'm playing a paradiddle, so I get a chance to do a right side and a left side and a right side. When I do the 4th bar, if you weren't following me, it was a 4-bar phrase. The 4th bar, I get 3 groups of 30-second notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, E, and then over to the left-hand lead. And I would sit, those are warm-ups I do. I could do it in an American position where when I lift up the tempo a little bit more with my forearm helping to generate the momentum and push, I'm also accessing some fingers, and that would be best done when I roll slightly out because I can keep a nice alignment of bounce to the stroke of the stick. If I'm trying to do fingers in a German palm down, I'm going to get a slice of that. And French grip, while it's very good to understand the elements and building blocks, you know, the range of like pulling way in for something is not reality all the time. If I'm doing more French grip stuff, it's more for timekeeping or getting to my floor tom, or if I'm doing cymbal rolls. I used to have a rule in my head with some of the stuff I did with my brother David with our group, where he'd have some textured intro or something in the tune where it required just some cymbals, you know, and rolls and stuff like that. And I had a rule in my head that was like, no doubles when you play those rolls. They have to be all single strokes. You know, a silly rule, but that's what I had in my head when I was younger. Now I would be like, wait a minute, I could do doubles just the same. So can you please elaborate on the French grip in terms of the position as the sticks? No. So if you're building up the very early stages of the French grip, I'll just give you a quick talk through. Ready? Relaxed at the shoulder, elbow slightly out. From my elbow inside to my center of my torso here. That's one alignment. Up to my shoulder, down here. Whoops, see that triangle? Watch that. If I drop my elbow, it's gone. And if I drop my elbow, my forearm will roll in, my wrist might drop. I'll have the wounded puppy paw. I don't want that. There's no wrist. That's not wrist. That's radius ulna. There's none of this in the French grip. I'm going to sit here statically. My elbow down to my thumb is going to be a straight line. I'm going to have the stick seated in the last joint of the index finger with my fingers in a slightly contoured position where the stick lays over the bed of the back three fingers into the middle of the ring, and towards the last joint or so of the pinky, depending upon the pinky finger length. And that's where I want to start. I would have a slight 30-degree slope towards the pad. Then if I was lifting up and I am just doing a French grip, what I will call a molar strike, I want to access an easy bend in the hinge in my elbow. And I want to feel that release of the stick not going below a 30-degree angle, because it will create an instability to the stroke. How's that for a quick wrap? Watch those positions. They're very important. When you get the understanding how the stick can move, then you're going to be waltzing into a whole new level of playing. Any tips for increasing speed? I have good technique and grip, but can't develop any speed. Please help. I'd have to see what you're doing, Tom, to see what it is that's holding you back. And as I stated earlier in this live stream, there are some guys who are blessed with what I call supersonic high-tech chops that they can, play faster than mortal men. I would qualify what we are after as not speed, but control. And you can't play what you don't hear. So if you're looking for speed, but you don't hear it, you also have to be able to think the phrases faster. How do you learn that? You got to play them slow, too. But I'd have to see what you're doing technically to help advance that. I know everybody that I deal with, or pretty much everybody, is always bitching and complaining about, I want faster singles, I want my single strokes, I want my single strokes. And single strokes are, like what? 1 small % of what we do. It's not like you go boom, with just full throttled singles in a 30-second note rhythm. Maybe, but probably not. And more often what you would do is outline your rhythmic values with some kind of a molar motion to it to really give highlight to the rhythmic subdivision that you're working with, or the spread of the subdivision. In other words, I could play 30-second notes. They don't have to be in 8. They could be in groups of 6. So anyway, that being said, I'd have to see what you're doing for speed, and of course the execution of the stick for paradiddles. There's a whole formula of how you get that stick to just rebound back to you. If I'm playing a fast paradiddle, I'll just focus on my left hand or my right hand. There's a molar element to that motion. So if I don't understand how it works slowly, I'm not going to even be close to considering what's going on at a faster tempo. And so again, your inner observation of what you're doing mechanically is huge in terms of putting a bright spotlight on it, so you go, oh yeah, that's what I'm missing. There's a guy out there, probably most people know him now. He's been around for a long time because he used to be a little more highlighted on Drumeo, but that's Ruben Spiker. And Ruben put out a little course of technique and trying to, show what he's gathered at his 32 or 33-year-old age. And he makes highlight of what I helped him out with his traditional grip to bust out and get better speed, where there was a hindrance. And we just had one interaction at a Drumeo hang that we were doing when it was NAMM show time. I was staying with the Drumeo guys because at that time my drum technique course was its second go around. And I just saw him playing and I went, dude, come on over here. Do that? No, try it this way. And his story, from what I understand, because I heard the backstory from one of my students just recently when he did a clinic and he was still talking about me, which I love it. Thank you, Ruben. That my little tip completely opened up his whole world. And he was first rather reticent and a little defensive about it, but he didn't really show that. He did have a reserved body posture, but I didn't know that he was so kind of inner rebellion to what I was saying. But he said then he gave it some thought, and it changed his left hand in his traditional grip. So I don't expect to be able to answer and give a magic word to everybody. However, that being said, even with Ruben, I could add a couple more things. But I need to see what you're doing so I can add quality to what I would say in terms of description of what you're doing or what you're not doing. Thomas Allen. Do you have any advice for improving speed for finger bounce in traditional grip? Yeah, you just got to get in there and get that index finger to be able to push. Now, there's guys who do that thing with the two fingers on top and roll out. But, it's that index finger that really does the driving. How much, do you use? I don't know. Like, again, I'm not sitting and belaboring my traditional grip because I just only do it when I'm teaching. However, if I had 2 students or even 1 student in a day where it's a traditional grip lesson, it does like raise the bar for me. It's all of a sudden I feel like, oh, hey, my left hand's working pretty good. I used to go to Italy a lot, and I would say like many guys, like maybe 50% to 60% were traditional grip guys, because there are a lot of guys who like to play jazz and they're very expressive and artistic. And so I spent a lot of time, and then I'd feel like a massive lift in my traditional grip playing. But, it's getting that index finger to pull in. But before that, if you don't have the character and the ensemble of fingers working in certain ways for independence of how that stick can sit, you may not be able to get there, right? It's a whole like deconstruction and reconstruction, essentially, so that things work more effective and efficient. Hammering out over and over, I've made this analogy several times, but if I just take the sticking of a paradiddle, but I have no form or format to how to play it, and I'm going, I could belabor that and smack the shit out of my pad for a lifetime and maybe never get any good flow or speed with that. So it's not what you do, it's how you do what you do. That's Freddie. That's the Freddie Gruber. I'll do my one Freddie impression. Bruce, it's not what you do, it's how you do what you do. So I heard those lines thousands of times. So they were inserted into the memory banks. And as a young guy, I had good recall for stuff, and I was very astute in my observation. So I was very steadfast to watching, but to hear it redundantly and watch Freddie teach when I was not a student, it added a lot of substance to what you could do and how you could build things to get that how to do things, for the motivation of the stick and make things work easier so you're not beating yourself up. So, any last thoughts there, Jeffrey?
Last thoughts. Well, you know what? We had a great group today. We had some birthday. I had a belated birthday for you, which is nice. And by Edison Hill.
Thank you, Edison. Yeah, Edison took a few lessons with me from the past. Thank you, sir. I appreciate
and Andre just wanted to, he asked the question earlier and he wanted to just thank you. And there were a couple of thank yous in here. And I really appreciate all that. And it's a wonderful group today. And we plan on doing these more often. We might do it next weekend. I have a birthday coming up next weekend. So we'll see.
I thought we were going to let you celebrate.
We might cut me loose on that one. But we'll be here for some follow-ups. And I think we talked about maybe do some theme streams. We'll see how that goes and get that information out. It would be kind of cool. We got some ideas. So yeah, I'll get on the masterclass stuff this week. So hopefully we can get that out to anybody who's interested and go from there. But yeah, great. I love the insight. Yeah.
Nice. Well, pretty flawless. I mean, we had a couple things, but
I learned something. You can't create a scene. You can't create a scene like I was trying to do. I was trying to create an outro scene. And it just did not work out for us. So you know what? We're not going to worry about it. So when we leave today, we might not have an outro scene. And you know what? That's okay. We'll just kind of keep it.
Whatever.
We'll just keep going.
Hey, I just want to thank you for your good work on your end. Jeff's back there pulling all the strings. So when they say, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, we're letting him do his thing. And with the new technology, I understand the stress of that, because as an older guy trying to learn a new thing quickly on the fly. But props to Jeffrey, man. Big thumbs up to you, dude.
Stop.
Well,
no. Yeah. It's interesting. It's fun for me. I enjoy it, but there's a lot going on here. And my biggest thing is I don't want to miss good questions or thoughts. We had a really good group today, and it was important that we got as many of those out we did, and I'm glad that everybody was willing to drop that stuff in there.
Yeah.
Until next time, we'll do that. And we talked about it. We'll produce the show. We'll have more We'll have some more things to show you, whether it be book pages out of Ted Reed or some things that
Exactly.
you draw up, music chords, just so people can have them, see them, and refer back to if they don't have the book even, they can come back and watch the video.
Yeah, as I say, I'm usually unscripted, so like on this
Right.
one, I didn't even think about
That's all right.
the
It's a hang.
possibility of opening up stick control. But that being said, everybody should have their stick control book anyway. But we will be prepared for any notation from now on in, because what I'll do is I'll just take my greatest hits and have them uploaded so you're accessible to go. Oh
I'll
yeah, we
throw
got that
I'll
page
throw them in
right.
the assets so we have them. You know what I mean?
That's right.
We'll have at least the greatest hits handy.
I'm
That's
going to
always
do that.
fun.
I'm going to do that this week. I'm going to send you a bulk of pages and say, here are the ones that we would say are the greatest hits. Use
Web
these.
monkey, get to work.
Ah!
It was good to talk. It was good to. It's always fun, and it was good. We spent 20 minutes talking and reminiscing about our previous days, and I think that's fun. I think there's a lot of people here our age or about. Maybe I'm sure younger,
Yeah,
but
man.
it's a good to reminisce. Once you get past 30, you start having those memories.
Well, something popped up. I was telling Jeffrey before we even signed on. There's a guy that I knew. It's a long story, but I'll just say this guy was a friend of my dad's, and one of my dad's probably only friends. My dad was not the social butterfly.
think so.
But this guy, I found out he passed away in February, and dig, 103 and 4 months. And I spoke with his wife yesterday and reminiscing about stuff because we go back way to the 60s. And so my point is wow, 103, what a hero. And she was telling me, and he was really good up until like the last couple of months. So like no dementia or anything like that. And I know this guy. He just was a guy who took care of business. He was very steadfast and very routine. And she said, I'll bet your dad and him are up there skiing now together.
Nice.
They used to ski quite a bit together. So anyway, everybody have a great day. Go pick up your sticks. And I hope I inspired some thought or concept. Come back, if not next week, in 2 weeks. Look out for the masterclass. If you're up in Fresno area, come out and see me at Bentley's on the 22nd of April. And I'll give you further elaborate dates to my London dates when I have everything etched in stone, but it's looking really good. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. We'll
Yep.
talk to you. We'll talk to you soon.
Peace.
Peace. Get rid of these guys. I just realized I dumped it in. We'll learn. We'll figure it out. All right, everybody. Talk to you soon.